Hey all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we'll be exploring a pretty cool looking retro-styled speaker called the VTS-01 from Glencraig. Aside from the aesthetics, it uses vacuum tube amplifiers as well as having a CD player slot, in addition to having modern Bluetooth 5.1 as a wireless speaker as well. So you can pick and choose. Plus, this multifunctional speaker is also an FM radio. You can attach an antenna for enhanced reception on the back, and it comes with an optional remote control. Plus, you can also link it using optical or component cables if you want to go with a wired connection, perhaps connecting it to a turntable, a record player, a TV, projector, using the 40-watt speakers built into the front here, which are going to be louder. These vacuum tubes also have LEDs on the bottom there for illuminating, acting as kind of a glow light. And as a quick recap in terms of differences between these vacuum tube amps versus solid-state amps, which are found in most consumer tech these days, those instead use transistors, electric components which are slightly smaller to amplify a signal, versus these larger tube amps are instead known for having slightly more warmth, harmonic richness of the sound that audiophiles or hi-fi enthusiasts may prefer, compared to the more clinical and slightly more precise sound that modern amps using transistors and electrical chips can produce. But because the vacuum tubes are more expensive to manufacture, they're more fragile because of the glass components, take up more space, that's why we don't really see it in mainstream tech anymore. But again, you're able to get some slightly more nuanced characteristics of the sound. So you can find it actually on sale right now on their website for around $264. Again, definitely not cheap. So it really is catered for hi-fi enthusiasts that are also looking for some added features like the aforementioned CD player mode that might be missing on most Bluetooth speakers that we've seen previously. Now, in terms of the build quality, it does have a real wood finish on the front here, aluminum alloy for the frame. In addition to the vacuum tube compartment here is also swappable with other vacuum tube amplifiers of your choice. So you can actually pop up this plate here using 4 screws for swapping out these pieces similar to keycaps on a mechanical keyboard, giving you a little bit more customization. That being said, a couple of things to keep in mind. This is not a portable boombox speaker that you can take on the go because it doesn't have a built-in battery inside. Instead, it has to be plugged in using the power cable for it to operate. It's more meant for indoor use, as you can kind of tell by the wood finish. It's not really IP rated, for example, slightly more sensitive components. Now, in terms of the other point would be the Bluetooth 5.1, although fairly up to date, it only uses the standard SBC and AAC audio codecs, which are fine. But again, as more of a hi-fi product, it would have been better if they included codec support for LDAC or aptX lossless. Some of those can transmit a little bit more detail using Bluetooth. So just keep that in mind. For the absolute best audio quality, you can choose CD or of course use some of the cables on the back, including optical, line in, if you wanted to squeeze out as much detail as possible out of this particular model. Quick look here at the packaging. It is pretty well presented. Just goes through some of the main features here on the side that we mentioned, as well as a pretty nicely documented user guide printed here in full color, giving this a very vintage overall look, and briefly introduces the history of vacuum tube amps, some of their differences in terms of sonic characteristics. And what's interesting is that there's even an active cooling fan, or they call it an exhaust fan, on the back. If the temperature here reaches over 55 degrees, to ensure long-term performance, it will activate the fan automatically for cooling. I've never really seen that before on a speaker. I've only seen it on computers, but another added component that's a little bit unusual since they claim that the tube amps might generate a little bit more heat. I also like the fact that they've chosen a slightly more retro-looking LED type display, also blending in with the retro vibes, almost a Nixie tube-like screen that can show different characteristics in this pixelated font. Although there isn't a companion app support, there are built-in EQ controls that you can activate. For example, to enhance the bass or to turn up the treble, there are 2 dedicated buttons on the remote, in addition to activating a pop profile, rock, jazz, classical, or vocal profile, as well as a neutral or flat profile can all be found. Last but not least, you can find some of the technical specs here, including the CD formats that it supports, audio CDs, CDR, or rewritable CDs, and the entire weight of the speaker is 5.1 kilograms. That converts to 11.2 pounds. Again, quite heavy for a desktop-sized speaker, similar to a boombox, and you can see here next to a phone, it's about 2 modern smartphones in terms of the overall width. Let's zoom in here onto the vacuum tube amplifiers, as well as peel off the protective plastic wrap. And I like the fact that all the walls here are treated with mirrors, making it very reflective, almost like an infinity mirror room inside, just bouncing off and around, just making the LED lights perhaps shine a little bit more brightly as you're looking at it from different angles. It actually casts a slightly more warmer hue, almost like a candle light, that I do really appreciate. It's actually quite pretty to peek inside. Again, creating the illusion that there are more amplifiers inside than in reality. There's really just two of them. Otherwise, located here on the side, you will find access to all of the controls. So there is going to be kind of an analog style knob for adjusting volume. It's crafted out of metal and feels very precise. There's 40 different levels that you can adjust back and forth between. Satisfying to engage with, as well as the skip track controls, play pause controls, mode selection for cycling between other options like USB. If you have a thumb drive connected, it can play back MP3s as well, FM radio mode, optical line in, as well as the Bluetooth modes can all be adjusted. You'll also find a power on and off key here on the side, so you can tap on that once to turn the entire thing on and off. You can see it takes a couple of seconds, in fact, for the vacuum tube amps to kind of heat up. And then turning the speaker around, we can see here on the back, we have the aforementioned AC power plug, another kind of manual power on and off switch. The back plate here is also coated with metal, and the wood finish continues here on the back as well. So it is very well built, contributing to that pretty heavy weight. So yeah, I do like the overall look, as well as the fit and finish does feel rather premium. And that active cooling fan is quite helpful. At first I thought it might have been gimmicky or overkill, but actually when it's off, if you touch on the top kind of metal plate, again for accessing the vacuum tube, so you want to replace them, it actually gets quite warm after being turned on for a couple of minutes. So it does draw a little bit more power there, with the vents here also helping dissipate some of the heat. Now moving into an audio quality demo, starting off with the Bluetooth mode. What I like is it's not sibilant or harsh or shrill at all, even on the higher volume levels. Something quite interesting though is that you guys saw on the maximum volume of the speaker at 40, it's actually not really changing the volume on the phone per se, unlike some other Bluetooth speakers I've seen previously. For example, if your phone volume here is set to 80%, the maximum cap from the speaker is also going to be 80%, and then it's going to scale down accordingly as you're using the knob. Granted, you can still play and pause music using the controls over here and control that without too many problems. Latency for the most part wasn't really a problem either if you're watching back some quick video clips. Here's also a quick Dolby Atmos surround sound test and see if we can hear the left and right channels of the speaker. So yeah, you can definitely hear the sound moving between the left and right sides. For things like movies, for example, it is quite cinematic, giving you almost that spatial sound effect. Also, the bass can be quite rumbly and overall satisfactory for a speaker of its size. And also the adjustment here for cranking up the bass versus reducing it for enhancing the trebles, basically, do actually function as advertised. On the Plus 10, it became more thumpy and almost kind of vibrated on the table over here. Definitely dialed it back a little bit more if you want to enhance the mids and trebles instead. So they do actually function and make a difference on the sound. Also briefly demonstrating how the EQ modes will shape the sound, starting off with the default here once again. So turning the volume down there, takeaway is again, the EQ options do make a perceivable difference. Again, depending on different genres that you're listening to, you can further fiddle around those controls. Not bad for ones which are built in. Now, one minor quirk though is in the Bluetooth mode, if I'm listening super closely when the volume is super low or completely paused like right now, I can hear a very faint, almost like a fan noise or white noise in the background. Again, partly because of that active cooling fan on the back. If it kicks in, unsurprisingly, it's going to be a tiny little faint noise there in the background compared to being completely silent. So if you are a super observant listener, it is something to keep in mind. I personally didn't find it to be that distracting. In fact, it was rather calming, especially when the music actually started playing. It basically drowned out all of these sounds. It wasn't really noticeable at all, but just a minor quirk that I did want to point out. Now here is the FM radio mode. It's rather quick to lock into different channels. We're going to mute the audio due to copyright reasons, but overall I was able to still find a pretty fair selection of channels in the region, and the antenna here you're able to expand, collapse accordingly, remaining relatively clear as far as the audio pickup from these channels. So yeah, whether it's listening to some news podcasts, emergency weather, or also for discovering new music in general, different genres in the area, you can also use this feature.
People get upset about it, so then he decides he's going to go back on, what do you do, off for a day or 2 days or something like that?
And the same really applies to the other modes, including CD playback as well. It didn't really have too many problems when it came to general recognition, and you just pop it in, again, like most CD players, DVD players. In this example, it's a blank disc, so you'll see there is no actual files on board, but I did test it with a couple of other album CDs. Again, for copyright, we won't be playing out the sound, but I didn't really have any problems in terms of reading them back, working as advertised. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on closer look at the VTS-01, this retro-styled wireless speaker. It's more than just a Bluetooth speaker though, such as also having the, again, CD player functionality, FM radio, having all of the I/O that we see in a more classic style speaker, whether that's optical, component cables, even a subwoofer output if you want to enhance the bass even more. Although interestingly, they haven't included a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, perhaps a bit more common. However, they have included an adapter cable in the box, which converts between a standard 3.5mm if you want to plug it into a MP3 player, a phone that still has a headphone port, and then it converts it into the left and right channels that you can then plug onto the speaker. So there is this cable that you can use instead, perhaps preserving a little bit more audio detail. Connection felt pretty stable in the wireless Bluetooth mode. There wasn't really any interruptions as long as within the same room. 10-meter range, it got sufficiently loud as well for filling up this entire space, packing a good punch. Although if you are trying to, again, be a super picky listener, the best absolute quality can be achieved using the CD as well as the line-in connections for even more lossless resolution detail. Those modes also having nearly no distortion, there's no static or any hissing of any kind, using those options compared to with Bluetooth. Again, there might be a little bit more of some artifacting if you are straining and listening super closely when the volume is turned all the way down. But generally speaking, pretty solid audio quality for a speaker of its class. Definitely a bit more lush sounding, for lack of a better description, thanks to these vacuum amplifier tubes. You can check out more details if you're interested in something like this in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. A pretty cool kind of retro throwback style speaker overall.